Once a year, global power players descend on the Swiss Alps for the World Economic Forum. The decisions they make here affect every country in the world and every single one of us. Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Davos 2025 saw the greatest concentration of financial and political power on earth. But for all of the leaders and politicians who came here, the one talking point was a man who didn't even travel to Switzerland. President Trump wasn't here in person, but he dominated Davos. Will there be a trade war with China and Europe? Will US election rhetoric now become global reality? These were just some of the questions the 3,000 delegates wanted answered, 5,000 feet high up in the Swiss Alps. Malaysia's Prime Minister was relaxed and confident about the year ahead, regardless.
From his statements, of course, very protectionist. He wants purely to focus on the United States of America. But I believe that this will probably settle down after a few months because most of his colleagues, advisors, are all international players.
The banking bosses who spoke to Roundtable were adamant a trade war is in nobody's interests.
If there are tariffs, you would expect that there would be a response from other countries. That response could come in the form of tariffs or other measures of people looking for alternative export markets.
AI and climate change were among the topics discussed at length here, and of course, the war in Ukraine.
The war on our continent, the war in Ukraine, with the aggression of Russia, and it is not to accept. We need accountability and we need to stay, I think, for a long time the side of Ukraine.
The veteran US politician John Kerry told Roundtable the world needs to up its game and build renewables, not keep drilling, as Trump has promised.
There's a huge marketplace moving towards clean energy. We do need abundant energy because the data centers for AI and other things will demand abundant energy.
Indian actor Bhumi Pednekar is passionate about the fight against climate change, having seen its impact on her own country.
Climate change is the largest looming threat that humanity is facing. In my country itself, in 2024, there were multiple wildfires. This year, the year began with the heartbreaking fires in LA, but while that was happening, there were parts of Africa, South America that were also burning.
Some union officials believe the focus on AI has more to do with profits than anything else.
So far, it's too early to really say exactly what will happen, but yes. And we're also worried about algorithmic management, for example. Workers complain about the fact that it's algorithms that are monitoring their work, surveillance, constant surveillance, wearing down workers.
President Trump has been invited to attend Davos 2026 in person. His message certainly landed this year, even if he didn't. Well, let's meet our guests. Here in the studio with me, I'm delighted to say we have Jayne. She's the author of the book Humans and AI, The Future of Work. Naomi Kerbel, Director of Communications at SEC, Newgate Communications and Advocacy Group. In Brussels, Philipp Lausberg. He is Senior Policy Analyst in the European Political Economy Programme. That's at the European Policy Centre. And in Washington, D.C., we have David de Roches. He is a former official in the US Department of Defense. He also worked on European security issues and was a NATO operations director. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Naomi, like me, you were in Davos. Just give me your assessment of the impact of President Trump.
Well, I think he was the elephant, and I'm not being rude here, but in the room for most of the week leading up to his speech. We only really found out on Monday or Tuesday that it was going to be a virtual address. So there was this kind of tentative excitement that he might actually be in person on the Thursday. But I would say that there was a real exhalation of breath after the inauguration. And what I mean by that is not that this would necessarily be said in interviews on excellent broadcasters like this, but behind the scenes, what I was seeing and hearing was chief executives feeling that transactional is back. Let's focus on the bottom line. We don't have to worry about DE&I policies. Let's move sustainability off the agenda. But realistically, I don't think that is going to happen. From what I understand, the President Trump that we see bombastic on the stage that gave the speech virtually on Thursday is bombastic in that setting, but behind the scenes more solicitous, more open to negotiation and conversation. So that filled me with some hope.
Jayne, business and the business world, they love certainty, and they're now in a situation where the most powerful person in the world thrives on uncertainty and keeping people guessing.
I saw that, and I thought that about his speech as well, actually. Politics aside, I think he missed the theme of Davos. It's a call for collaboration in the intelligent age, and that's absolutely what we need to get widespread adoption of AI. But yes, we need businesses to adopt it, and so we need certainty. And by that, I mean we need a little bit more information on the vision for AI and what the end game is for humanity. So there's lots of talk of investing in infrastructure and data centres, and I'm all for that. We need it. We need the investment in AI research. But what we also need as well is the strategy laying out on what it means for people. And I think that was what was missing from a lot of the conversations for me, is what's going to matter to people.
Philipp, you're in Brussels. He was absolutely scathing about Europe, the European Union, rules and regulations that he feels are holding American business back in terms of doing deals in Europe. What was the assessment from your end of Trump's words? I mean, there was a lot of criticism there.
I think in general, there's a strong feeling here that also in Davos, it was clear that now a few powerful politicians are calling the shots and not economic decision makers anymore. And I think his insistence on, tariffs, but also on deregulations has sent shockwaves across the EU already before he accessed to the presidency, of course. But I think now his threats have become more palpable. Also, now that he started, with his agenda on deporting refugees and so on. I think here really the question now is about how to react to a possible tariff war, also how to diversify away from the US, and also how to deregulate better. And I think that message has rang clearly here in Brussels even before. And I think the American efforts to deregulate will put the pressure even higher. And President von der Leyen, EU Commission President von der Leyen, has also in Davos talked about reducing red tape, and that is really one of the points that we will see much more of in the future. But also the looking out for other partners, and I think that's not only EU but also other middle powers outside the US and China, superpower nexus, where there is really now talk about ramping up trade deals, looking out for other partners, maybe even banding together and see how to react against the trade war.
David, if he does follow through on all of these threats, one very senior banker said to me that it would ultimately lead to tariffs being reciprocated on American goods and a trade war and global inflation, and it would be good for nobody. Self-defeating was the phrase that was used.
Yeah, well, a couple things. So first off, it's always important to realize that when Trump speaks, he's saying what he's saying, but he's also speaking in large part to his base. And Davos is the epitome of everything that his base detests. I mean, Davos is where John Kerry goes, not where Donald Trump goes. And I think that a lot of his remarks were aimed towards people, blue-collar folks, factory workers, who feel that the existing economic order is not doing well for them, that there's a race to the bottom. There's also a contradictory message there. On the one hand, he says he wants to eliminate global regulation that impedes free trade, but at the same time, he says he's considering raising tariffs, which, of course, will impede free trade. I think there's also an important thing, particularly for a European audience, that you cannot dissect the economic from the political. I think he sees the economic as being a tool that the United States has as the world's largest market, the world's largest economy, that has not been used effectively in the interests of the United States. And sometimes he'll tie the two together. So as when Colombia refused to accept some of its citizens who were in the United States illegally over the weekend, he threatened tariffs, and then the Colombian president said, "Oh well, we won't accept a U.S. aircraft, but I'll send my personal plane to pick them up and take them." So he's connecting the two of those. So I think it's maddening for analysts to try to analyze Trump, because you can never tell when he says which audience he's speaking to and what he really means. But I think it's early days, and what we'll see is, if you look at the Lodestar, which is making blue-collar workers, particularly in the United States, in a better position, and his thing that the international order is weighted against them, and that other countries are sort of twisting the rules, that's his view. I think then you can predict him a little bit more accurately. But there's always an element of uncertainty.
Thanks, David. Well, it was a long, rambling, typical Trump speech, but this was the absolute crux of what he said. Just take a listen to this. This was his message to business leaders all over the world.
My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. We're bringing them down very substantially, even from the original Trump tax cuts. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt.
Naomi, just on that, I mean, there's a lot of bombastic nature of Trump in there in what he's saying. Do you think he'd really go ahead with these tariffs on European goods in particular?
If we look back at the last presidency, there were a number of things that he said that he didn't follow through on. And to your point earlier, Enda, about it being a reverse-sum game, because ultimately cost is going to go up around the world, I think he is very, very aware, and he has got some very good advisors now on board. So, listen, we never know with Trump. To David's point, you know, we assume, and then we assume something else is going to change. We can never, ever know. So let's just wait and see. I'm in a holding pattern. I don't think he'll go through with all of them to the degree he says he will.
Jayne, I want to move away from Donald Trump and talk about AI.
Okay.
This is your area of expertise.
Yeah.
One very senior union official from Europe said to me that she fears all of these billionaires and big business leaders getting very drilled down into AI and very, very excited about it. Her fear is that this will be at the cost of humans in the workforce.
Yes, and that's my fear too. I think we won't see it as extreme as some people are saying. I think jobs will change. We'll get new types of jobs as well. But I think the estimates at the moment in the UK, between 3 and 8 million jobs could be lost. Now, if you can imagine, think of the coal industry in the north of England, the motor industry in Detroit in America. When we have mass layoffs like that, it has a generational impact. So that's why I'm advocating for a collective intention that AI should be used for the good of humanity. And there is a way of doing it without having to replace people. AI should be there to assist people, complement people, and not replace people. We can get organisations doing things so much faster, cheaper, more efficient, more productive, and that can have a huge impact on the organisation and in turn the economy. But there's a way to do that then without job displacement. I call it the gift of time. And what we can do with the gift of time is we either reskill people, that's absolutely what we need to keep the workforce resilient. We use them to do more and different things so they can create new products, do more research, do something else. Or I really do think it's time that we literally give people the gift of time and look seriously at things like the 4-day working week and universal basic income.
Philipp, just to you on the AI issue, is Europe well placed to benefit from whatever positives come from AI? I mean, a lot of officials in the union sphere are very, very fearful, but surely as European economies need growth, Germany in particular, France, the UK, there's got to be opportunities there.
There are definitely opportunities, but as the famous saying goes, the US innovates, China produces and the EU regulates. And even there, I think the EU has mainly been at the forefront with regulation when it comes to AI. The famous AI Act has been seen by some as a success, also for protecting people from the dark side, so to say, of AI. But there's a lot of business opportunities that are also being lost through that. That is the general impression here. There has been some initiatives also of EU initiatives where funds are being invested in AI centers around the union. So there's definitely, a willingness to do more about it, but the regulatory aspect is looming over it. And I also doubt, and that's one of the key issues of the EU, that there's going to be enough investment. And we've seen Trump announcing the Stargate initiative, where there's about $500 billion to be invested in AI infrastructure in the US. Something like that is just completely dwarfs what's happening in the EU. I mean, there's something like $5 billion going into similar initiatives union-wide. And that's why, while it is an opportunity for the European Union and while there's an awareness, I kind of doubt that the Europeans will be able to catch up or to keep track.
David, to you, honestly, from an American perspective, is Europe really that bad a place to do business?
It's a difficult place to do business, I think, compared to, say, Europeans doing business in the United States. I think that there's a couple of beefs. I mean, it's gotten better. At least you have, as your first speaker noted, business likes predictability. And so having a unified body of weights and measures and tariffs and standards is unified. But I think there's a conviction in the United States, whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, that a lot of these regulatory barriers are erected specifically to defeat imports. It's basically protectionism under subterfuge. You think about things like the chlorinated chicken. Business practices that are done here. The idea is that the EU, and I think a third of the budget is directed towards protecting European agriculture, which is not very efficient, that it is designed to protect European interests rather than free trade, and that, of course, one of the aspects of that is keeping out other people trying to do
But
business.
David, is it really that bad that we don't want chlorinated chicken in Europe?
Look, I drink chlorine in my water. I swim in it every day. This is something that didn't exist. I mean, I think a bunch of people got together and decided that the way commercial chicken is processed was different, and that let's make an issue of that to stop that. I mean, it can be negotiated and all that, but I'm using this as an example. There are a number of practices that are acceptable in other countries around the world that the European Union decides to regulate, and that's increasingly viewed, not just by the United States, but by other external trading partners, as a form of hidden trade protectionism.
Thanks, David. Naomi, to you, is Davos still relevant? All these billionaires, and there were a lot of people who weren't there. The Chinese, they sent a vice premier. India, I didn't see hardly any representation at senior government level. A lot of big players didn't go.
So interesting on the India point, they had two houses this year. There's the main stretch of the promenade,
yes,
which has these houses as they're dubbed in Davos. And there was quite a big Indian presence. So that, I think, is a really interesting area to look at for investment. One of the things that I think was missing was the climate discussion. And it was happening in a number of the conversations. But of course, Trump is reversing out of the Paris Climate Accord, which causes great concern for lots of participants in that. But one thing that I would say that I noticed, a survey that came out from Capgemini the week of Davos, 2,500 CEOs around the world who were surveyed, and they said they're not pulling back. 2/3 said they are still going to be investing in sustainability, but they're reframing it, right? They're calling it something else.
What are they calling it?
It's all supply chain cost cutting. It's all reviewing our standards, our procedures, and in turn that's going to lead to environmental benefits.
So cost cutting.
It's cost cutting, exactly that. But it's not necessarily cost cutting of people. it's cost-cutting of the supply chain that's making it more efficient, which I think is where the AI conversation comes in. I think the fusion of AI and climate is incredibly exciting. And that's why I do think Davos is absolutely still relevant, because it gives CEOs and global leaders the chance to come together for 4 or 5 days to really discuss these knotty debates and to learn from each other. And that's why I think it's still relevant, despite the costs.
And Jayne, do you think Davos is still relevant?
Absolutely. Even taking the world leaders aside, it's about getting the experts and the influencers and the thinkers from around the world together to kind of set out our stall about, what do we want our future to be? And I was hearing about some great sessions around responsible AI. I'm not the only voice kind of asking for that intention, that collective intention to use AI for the good of humanity. There's many other CEOs who are thinking like I do. So I think giving people that place, like you said, to discuss and ensure that there's agreement and consensus is really important.
Philipp, I just want to touch upon defence and security. President Trump made a big deal out of everybody spending 5% of GDP on defence. President Zelensky, I saw him, he was there in person, he spoke very eloquently, and that was the figure he came out with as well, 5% of GDP. I mean, the message really was loud and clear. Europe needs to up its game.
Yeah, I mean, that's Trump's been saying that for a long time. And to be honest, you can debate the 5% goal, but in general, he's right in that respect. Europe has been living on a peace dividend and under the American protection shield for decades. And with the Russian aggression in the East, I think it's high time that the Europeans invest more in their own security. The 5% goal might be a bit high. The only country that is set to more likely achieve that soon is Poland. Also, the Baltic countries are in favor of it. The Germans have their reservations. I think going much above 2% is for the time being very difficult to reach. Also because of their constitutional debt break. For the French, I think 3% is their goal, but I mean, it's generally the direction of the journey is going towards more defense investment, and I think that is something where Trump's first presidency already left a lasting legacy, and of course, the pressure from Russia is, and especially if there's a peace deal that might require peacekeepers in Ukraine, that will even more require the Europeans to invest more. And of course, Trump being, threatening Greenland, trying to pull out of the EU more and more troops. I think all of that adds up to a massive need for European defense investment. And it will happen. It's just a question how quickly and how much.
David, is this a potential flashpoint between Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, and President Trump? Because the UK is struggling to spend 2.3% of GDP on defence. There simply is no money left in the UK. And Trump is demanding 5%.
Yeah, it is. Well, not only that, the 2.3%, the UK recategorized a lot of its foreign aid as defense spending. So even that 2.3% is a little bit of sleight of hand there. Yeah, it is. And I think that, President Trump will have some significant tension over this. I mean, if you look at the reporting out of the UK, it is not capable of conducting military operations in line with its ambitions, in line with its national strategies. The peace dividend that Philipp has spoken about, that's gone. It's been used for something else. And I think that hard choices need to be made in the UK. And they're going to be politically unsavory, particularly for a politician like Keir Starmer, who I haven't seen an elected politician go so precipitously from landslide to, dismissing senior advisors under pressure. The fall has been remarkable, so it's going to be difficult. And also, of course, nobody in the UK likes Donald Trump. So if he moves towards him, that will further complicate.
I think he has some fans, David. I think he has some friends and some fans in the UK. Just Naomi, final point to you. Rachel Reeves, the British Chancellor, Finance Minister, she was in Davos banging the drum for investment for the UK. How's she getting on, do you think?
I think that there was a turning point for her. She'd had a very difficult week the week before because of some poor numbers out of the UK. But I think she did have a turning point in Davos. And to David's point before, this week, President Donald Trump and Sir Keir Starmer had a 45-minute very good conversation, we hear. So we hope that that will mean that UK-US relations continue on a very good path.
And Jayne, to you, you mentioned a figure earlier on about the UK. AI could remove between 3 and 8 million jobs from the workforce. I mean, that
is the estimate at the moment. But again, if we can offset that with reskilling and creating new jobs as well, then there's still real opportunity with AI, especially like when you're talking about we are in a difficult economy. I'd argue it's still worldwide with the recovery from the pandemic. But if we make the right choices now, and they're starting in that direction with the UK AI action plan, there's a lot of investment coming, a lot of trying to get the right talent here. But, you know, we can get a lot more output, a lot more GDP, a big boost to the economy by having that adoption of AI. It can really increase our productivity. So there's ways and means to go, and I'd love to see some bold progression in that area.
So, Jayne, just one final question. Everyone's looking for growth in the UK. Do you think AI could actually push Britain forward?
I absolutely think that's where we should be going. It's you know, there's so many new markets and new uses for it. Everybody can do so much more with AI. I just want us to be careful and proceed with caution to make sure that we're not going to experience that job displacement that people are worried about.
Sound advice. Jayne, Naomi, Philipp, and David in the United States, thank you all so much for your insight on this one. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.